The planet was officially called coldest, but the soldiers just called it the ice grave. For 6 months of the year, the sky was the color of old steel, and the wind screamed like artillery. Snow buried old trenches and rusted wrecks, hiding the bones of 2 empires that had bled each other dry. On the edge of a forgotten battlefield stood a small, stubborn house, a prefab cabin half buried in ice, its chimneys coughing out thin trails of smoke. Inside lived Rian Holt, a former human sergeant who had walked away from the war with scars, nightmares, and a pension that barely covered heating fuel. He fixed old machines for the few remaining settlers, traded repairs for canned food, and pretended the galaxy beyond coldest didn't exist. The war had taken his squad, his brothers and sisters in arms, and the woman he almost married. He came here to freeze the memories away. But even on a dead world, the galaxy had a way of finding you. The first sign was the distress beacon. A thin, broken signal cut through the static on his old comms unit, just a repeating ping in coordinates not far from his ridge. Rian almost ignored it. People died out here all the time, but soldiers were trained for one thing. You don't leave someone to die in the snow. He took his battered snowcrawler out into the white storm. The wind clawed at his faceplate, and visibility dropped to a gray blur. After an hour, he saw Ita's small transport shuttle, broken-backed in the snow, smoke curling from its engines. The ramp was half open, ice forming around the edges. Inside, huddled in the dim light, were 12 women. Some human, some alien, some hybridized red from cold and grief, clothing torn and patched. They stared at him with a mix of fear and stubborn defiance. One of them, a tall woman with silver skin and dark eyes, stepped forward. "We were on a relocation ship," she said, voice shaking. "War widows. The transport was hit by debris in orbit. The crew is dead. We have nowhere else to go." Rian could have turned back. He could have called the nearest outpost, reported survivors, and handed them off. But the nearest official shelter was weeks away, and the storm outside was already growing teeth. He remembered freezing nights in trenches. Remembered the sound of men begging not to be left behind. "You'll die out here," he said simply. "The winter's just starting. My place isn't big, but it's warm." Some of the women exchanged wary glances. They were widows of soldiers, after all. They had trusted uniforms before and lost everything. The silver-skinned woman folded her arms. "Why help us?" she asked. "You don't know us." Rian shrugged, feeling the weight of old ghosts on his shoulders. "Because someone should have done it for my people. Get your things. We don't have much time before the storm closes in." Within the hour, 12 war widows and 1 tired ex-sergeant were squeezed into his cabin. The doors sealed against the howling wind. For the first time in years, his home was full of unfamiliar voices. The first days were chaos. The cabin was built for 1 person, not 13. There weren't enough beds, so they made pallets on the floor. Rian's routine wake, stoke the fire, run diagnostics on old machines was shattered. One widow, Mara, a human with cropped black hair and sharp eyes, started reorganizing his supplies without asking. "You're wasting heat," she complained. "You stack the fuel like this, it burns slower." Another Lyra, the silver-skinned woman, refused to sit with her back to the door. She had seen too many raids. A quiet alien widow named Vesha, with blue markings across her face, flinched at every loud noise. They argued over cooking, over chores, over the use of water for washing when ice had to be melted by hand. Rian kept his temper as best he could. He fixed the heater twice a day, patched a leaking wall, and built extra bunks out of scrap wood. At night, as the wind roared outside, the widows whispered in languages he almost recognized, words of grief, names of the dead. He pretended not to listen, yet he noticed something. Even in their anger and fear, they refused to give up. The war had taken their husbands, but not their will to survive. That stubbornness felt strangely familiar. On the 5th night, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, and the heater hummed weakly, while Rian crawled under the floor to check the reactor links. The widows sat close to the central fire, wrapped in blankets. Their voices were low, but with the reactor noise gone, he heard everything. Mara spoke first. She told of her husband, a sniper who never missed a shot until an orbital strike erased his entire unit. Lyra talked about her bondmate, a scaled officer from another world, killed when a ceasefire was broken by a surprise bombing. Vesha's story was shorter. A husband drafted, a battle station destroyed, a message that never came. One by one they shared pieces of their lives, a favorite laugh, a song he used to sing, the way he brewed tea or polished boots. Rian, hidden under the floor, felt their memories hitting him like shrapnel. When the power finally stabilized, he climbed out, face dirty with grease. The widows fell silent, watching him. He could have pretended he'd heard nothing. Instead, he sat down by the fire. "My squad leader," he said quietly, "used to whistle before a fight. Drove us crazy. Said if the universe was going to kill him, it might as well have a soundtrack." The widows looked at him differently after that, as someone who knew the same kind of emptiness. As days turned into weeks, alien customs slipped into the cramped cabin. On one night when the moons were bright, Vesha drew a small symbol in ash on the wall, 2 circles overlapping. "It means shared grief," she explained when Rian noticed. "Where I come from. Widows draw it when they honor the dead together." Another widow, Risha, with delicate insect-like antennae, placed a small metal charm above the door. For protection, she said. Our people believe the spirits of fallen warriors stand guard where their loved ones sleep. Rian, who had never been much for rituals, found himself respecting each one. He gave them space to perform their quiet ceremonies, whispered prayers, songs in strange harmonies, little offerings of food left by the window for the lost. He even joined once, standing awkwardly in the circle as they chanted soft alien words. You don't have to, Lyra told him. I know, Rian said, but they were soldiers too, on one side or another. That means something. In that little cabin on the ice grave, human and alien ways of mourning mixed into something new, something that belonged to all of them. The arguments didn't vanish, but they changed shape. Instead of shouting, they teased. Instead of snapping, they sighed and started over. Rian taught them how to reinforce the walls against icequakes. Mara helped him seal the windows with scavenged polymer sheets. Vesha discovered she had a knack for fixing small tech. She repaired Rian's old music player, and for the first time in years, soft songs filled the cabin. Risha taught them how to make a kind of sweet, spiced tea from a native plant Rian had always ignored. Lyra, who had grown up on a mining station, reshaped his storage room so that every scrap of food was counted and planned. One stormy evening, the roof threatened to buckle under the weight of snow. All 13 of them climbed up with ropes and shovels, working together in the freezing wind, laughing in disbelief at the insanity of it. Look at us, Mara shouted over the gale. War widows and an ex-sergeant saving a shack at the end of the galaxy. Rian felt something warm in his chest that wasn't just exertion. For the first time since the war, he didn't feel completely alone. Outside their little island of warmth, Calder 7 grew cruel. The storms lasted longer. Temperatures dropped lower than Rian had ever seen. The few remaining settlements went quiet on the radio, one by one. Supply drops were delayed, then stopped altogether. Fuel became precious. They rationed heat, moving everyone into the main room and closing off the rest of the cabin. Frost crept along the walls, turning them into glittering prisons. Rian spent hours every day checking the reactor, listening to its uneven hum. Sometimes, in the dark hours when the wind screamed loudest, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. 13 lives were now bound to the choices he had made. If the heater failed, if the reactor overloaded, if the roof gave in, they would all die together in this place. And yet, when he looked around at the circle of faces by the fire, tired, scarred, but alive, he knew he couldn't have done anything else. The threat did not come from the cold. It came from the sky. One evening, as the storm finally calmed, Rian picked up a new signal on his long-range scanner. A ship, small, unregistered, coming down fast. It didn't ping local channels. It didn't request landing clearance. It just dropped through the atmosphere like a hunting bird. Rian felt his stomach twist. He'd seen ships like that during the war. Raiders, slavers, deserters, scavenging whatever they could from forgotten worlds. And what was more valuable than a group of widows declared displaced persons by a galaxy that had already forgotten them? He turned off the scanner and forced a calm expression onto his face. Stay inside, he told the widows. Lock the doors. No one opens up unless it's me. Mara's eyes narrowed. What did you hear? Trouble, he said simply. Then he went to the storage room and opened the old weapons locker he swore he would never touch again. The raiders came on foot, bundled in scavenged armor, faces hidden behind cracked visors. There were 6 of them, weapons glowing in the dark as they approached the cabin. The leader raised a hand, signaling the others to surround the place. Rian stepped out before they could knock. Door opening with a hiss of warm air behind him. He wore his old combat armor, patched and faded, the insignia of a long-dead regiment still visible on the chest. His rifle hung relaxed in his hands, but his eyes were hard. This settlement is protected, he called. Turn around and leave. One raider laughed. By who? A retired soldier and a bunch of widows. Behind Rian, unseen by the raiders, Lyra moved to the small window, fingers flying over the controls of the improvised defense grid she and Vesha had quietly wired into the perimeter in case the war ever found them again. You get one warning, Rian said. That was it. The leader lifted his weapon. The moment stretched, then the night exploded. The defense grid snapped to life, sending arcs of blue energy through the snow, knocking 2 raiders off their feet. Rian moved like the soldier he had tried to stop being, using the terrain, firing short, controlled bursts, driving them back from the cabin. Inside, the widows did not cower. Mara guarded the back door with a shock baton. Vesha monitored the grid's power levels, shouting updates. Risha held the younger, more fragile widows close, ready to move if the walls were breached. In minutes that felt like hours, it was over. 2 raiders fled into the storm, to lay unconscious in the snow. One never moved again. The leader, wounded and furious, glared at Rian. This isn't over, he spat. It is for you, Rian replied, weapon steady. You don't come back. You don't speak of this place. Or next time, no one walks away. The raider staggered off into the darkness. Rian's hands shook as he lowered his rifle. War, it seemed, had not quite finished with him. Weeks later, when the worst of the winter finally began to break, a patrol ship from the new joint government finally arrived. They had heard rumors of a crash, of raiders, of survivors on coldest 7. They offered transport, relocation, new homes on warmer worlds. The officer in charge looked around the cramped cabin with a practiced sigh. "You don't have to stay here," she told the widows. "We can place you in proper housing, safe cities, support programs." Ryan expected them to accept. Why wouldn't they? Anything was better than scraping a life out of ice. He nodded, already planning how to return to his quiet, empty days. But when the officer asked for a decision, Lyra stepped forward. "We're not leaving," she said calmly. The officer blinked. "I'm sorry, this is our home now," Mara added, standing beside Ryan. "We built it. We survived here together." Vesha touched the overlapping circle symbol on the wall. "Our dead are honored here. Our fear was faced here. We were just numbers in someone's database before. Here we are, people." The officer turned to Ryan. "You understand what you're agreeing to? You'll be responsible for them. There will be no more official support beyond basic supplies." Ryan looked at the 12 women who had come into his life like a storm, widows from different worlds, different faiths, different wars, but now, somehow, his people. "Yeah," he said softly. "I understand. They're staying. So am I." In the months that followed, the cabin changed again. It grew. With the help of supply drops and scavenged materials, they added new rooms, a proper generator, a greenhouse dome for food. What had once been a lonely refuge became a small community. The people in nearby settlements began to visit. Some were curious, some skeptical, some afraid of the widow's house on the ridge. But when their heaters broke or their water lines froze, it was Ryan and his strange family who helped. The widows taught alien healing techniques, shared rituals that comforted even hardened miners, cooked meals that tasted of worlds far away, and somehow, without anyone naming it, the house turned into a symbol, a place where war did not define who you were allowed to be next door at night. When the sky cleared and the stars glittered like shards of broken glass, Ryan would stand outside, listening to the laughter drifting from inside. The weight of responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders, but it was a weight he chose to carry. Is this a new beginning? He would wonder, or just another kind of burden? Maybe, he decided, it was both, and maybe that was all right. The galaxy had forgotten coldest 7. It had moved on to new battles, new treaties, new headlines. But on the frozen edge of nowhere, a single house full of war widows and one tired sergeant kept a different kind of peace. They could have left. They could have accepted new lives in warmer, safer places. Instead, they chose to stay where they had fought the last quiet battle, the battle to keep their hearts alive. In the end, they were not just widows, not just refugees, not just survivors of a war that took too much. They were builders, guardians, and stubborn souls who refused to be moved again by anyone else's orders. If you were offered a way out, would you take it, or would you stay where your scars were finally understood? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you leave the frozen world behind, or stay in the only home that truly chose you back?